Now, if we're talking about the historic herd, the heritage herd of red deer, they were brought here with permission by an acclimatisation society. Starting, I think the first letters seem to be going around in the 1860s about bringing some deer across here. 1871, we see more mentions of it, and 1873 to 1876, they brought in the first red deer. Now, it makes a great story, and that's one that we'll deal with in its own clip about the exact origin of those animals. But they were brought here with royal decree as a gift from Queen Victoria to the people of this state. That's what's depicted on the front cover of this feral deer strategy. So that's the first one we'll start with. Unfortunately, when you look at the website for the feral deer strategy, you'll see that there is a red stag depicted on the right-hand side. When you look closely, you can see that this stag is of Eastern European descent or possibly Festal German. The ear shape is incorrect, so's the body, and the 20-odd inch trait tines are a dead giveaway. The previous draft of the Feral Deer Management Strategy, T13-18, shows a rooster hind, a chital in the middle, and a red stag on the right-hand side. Now, it can be clearly seen that that stag is also a true feral deer because it's even still got a blue ear tag in its offside ear. Possibly the best report that has been done over the years on the situation in Queensland was done by Peter Jesser, and it's commonly known as the Jesser Report. Unfortunately, also on the front there, the red deer that are depicted are true farm deer in very poor condition and not true representation of the historic or heritage herds. If we look at the latest draft of the feral deer strategy, the history of feral deer in Australia is quite incomplete. It has no mention of any historic values of these deer, and it lumps everything into the one basket. Now, the Ridge Group has tried to do better than that. If you go to the Ridge website, you'll see amongst all the other documents the Wild Deer in Queensland discussion paper. Now, on the front of this paper is a photo of an actual Queensland red stag. This stag was caught out of the wild, and yes, he has an ear tag in his ear, but he was standing actually still in the deer trap he was caught in 1981. This is a classic example of a true Queensland red stag. Now, let's look at where these deer actually came from. A heritage red deer herd in Queensland was given to the common people of this country as a gift from Queen Victoria in 1873. This was truly a momentous occasion because this animal was largely regarded as a royal animal, something that was only there for aristocracy and for the Queen at the time, the Queen of Queensland, to give these as a gift to the everyday people was something extremely significant. When you look at these stags in photos like these in front of the castle, the style of head that you see there on these stags is so very, very similar to stags that we still see in the bush here today. These are not your great stags that have 10, 15, even 20 points a side as seen in New Zealand. These are stags that generally only carry 10, 12 or up to 14 points. And when you look closely at this photo here of the Great Walk on the way down to the castle, you'll see the style of the spikers and hinds depicted here are exactly the same as what you see in the bush in southeast Queensland. From Windsor Park, these deer were brought across to Werribee Park, which is situated about 30 kilometres from Melbourne in Victoria. It's a magnificent centre that I would suggest that everybody, when you get a chance to visit, please do. There was various acclimatisation societies operating at the time, and their goal was to bring across animals that were useful as food and for sport for the early settlers of this country. If you're looking for a full account of the history of the deer in Australia, I'd suggest no better book than An Introduction to the Deer of Australia by that great dear man, Arthur Bentley. From Werribee Park in Victoria, this small gift of deer for the people of Queensland were brought up to the Brisbane Valley to the property of the McConnell family, where they were held for a short time before their introduction into the nearby ranges. These animals were transported as a game animal with full authority from the government, and they were released to be a wild game animal into the bush. They were never intended to be feral. Now, what was regarded as the feral areas of not just the red deer, but also the chital, the fallow and the roosa, were put down by no other than the Governor of Queensland and recorded under an order in council. Specific areas for each species of wild deer was put down under this order in council, and they did so by going from town to town along certain roads to encircle the entire areas. For species like the red deer, it's interesting to note that they have hardly moved at all outside this specified area in 150 years. The wild deer of Queensland were regarded as introduced fauna under the Fauna Conservation Act 1974 to 1985. A tag and permit system was put in place, but for a number of reasons it was very poorly supported by hunters of this country, and ultimately it failed. And for those people out there that question the integrity of both myself and the Ridge Group towards the wild deer of Queensland, I suggest you read a paper that I wrote in conjunction with Steve Watson back in 1995 titled Queensland's Wild Deer and Their Role in Sustainable Wildlife Management. I think this preamble says it all. Now, many of the associated details surrounding the heritage herds of wild deer in Queensland can be found within our attachments that are associated with this discussion paper. The history of the red deer in New Zealand is a far more complex situation with multiple releases right across both islands. A great book to read is The Introduction and Establishment of Red Deer in New Zealand by Logan and Harris. It shows that many of the great herds, like the Otago herd, can be traced back to the Werribee Park strains as well, and the Warnham Park bloodlines also feature very prominently right across New Zealand. As I mentioned before, we'll put a lot of this material on our website there for open viewing. But because of a lot of the subjects are probably a bit contentious, some of them are a bit too graphic, we can't put all of it up there for public viewing, so it will be private. It will be for members only. But this is where we've developed the opportunity for people all over the world that wish to support our small, humble little group to become a member, a supporting member of the Ridge Group for $25 a year. Okay, this will give you a chance to get newsletters, to put up your opinions, to be read out at different meetings so you can have a contribution into what we're doing, and it'll give you access to all the clips, all the details, and that will include many guided hunts, Ridge Group ballot hunts, venison hunts on all the different species, plus a whole heap of material that is pertaining to the research that we've done and the future. So if you'd like to support us, have a look at the link below here and join up. We'd love to have you on board.